She waited 60 years to become a mother, and just hours after giving birth to twins, her husband shot her dead. 20 years earlier, the world had been colder, harder. It was a rainy October evening in 2004, and Officer Marlene Bryant was chasing down a suspect on foot through the alleys of East Atlanta. She was younger then, sharper, faster, with fire in her legs and steel in her heart. The man she was pursuing had just robbed a convenience store at gunpoint. Her boots splashed through puddles, her breath clouded in the night air. But then, a sound stopped her. Not a gunshot, not a shout, a cry. Faint, fragile. She turned a corner and found herself staring at a cardboard box next to a dumpster. Inside, swaddled in nothing but a stained towel, was a newborn, barely alive, skin mottled purple, lips trembling. She radioed for backup with one hand and scooped the baby up with the other, holding the tiny body close to her chest, whispering, "You're okay. I got you. I got you." She never caught the suspect that night, but she saved a life. The hospital said the baby, later named Jeremiah, would have died within minutes had she not found him. She stayed by his side all night, watching his chest rise and fall, transfixed. Something inside her cracked open that night, a longing so deep and ancient it scared her. It was the first time she truly wanted to become a mother. In the months that followed, she tried, quietly, desperately, fertility clinics, prayer groups, vitamins, acupuncture. Nothing worked. Her then-husband grew distant, frustrated, then cold. When he finally walked out, he didn't even say goodbye, just left a note that read, "I need a life that gives me something back." She burned the note, but not the hope. Marlene poured herself into her work. Promotions came, medals, a reputation. She became the one others called when things went sideways, the one who kept her cool under pressure. But behind the badges and the plaques, the ache remained. Every case involving a child, an overdose, a kidnapping, a custody battle, hit her harder than she ever admitted. She kept a photo of Jeremiah in her locker for years. He was adopted by a good family, sent her letters sometimes, called her Officer Angel. She never told him the truth, that holding him changed her more than anything else ever had. Now, decades later, as she lay in a hospital bed, 60 years old and cradling her own twins, she thought of that night again, of the rain, the cardboard box, the fragile breath against her chest. She had chased down so many ghosts in her life, bad men, broken promises, shattered dreams. But tonight, she wasn't chasing anything. She had caught something real, justice and mercy. Two names, two reasons, two final chances at a kind of peace she once thought she'd never know. In the early morning hours of February 8th, 2024, the maternity ward at St. Mercy Hospital in Atlanta was unusually quiet. Only a few nurses wandered the dim hallways, and the soft beeping of machines echoed faintly from behind closed doors. In room 212, however, history was being made. Lying in a hospital bed, exhausted but glowing, was Lieutenant Marlene Bryant, a 60-year-old decorated police officer and one of the longest-serving women in the Atlanta Police Department. Her graying curls were damp with sweat, her breathing shallow, but her eyes shimmered with joy. Cradled in her arms were two newborns, a boy and a girl, wrapped in pastel blue and pink blankets. Their tiny chests rose and fell against her as she whispered, "Justice. Mercy. Welcome to the world." After decades of chasing criminals, solving homicides, and putting her personal life second to the job, Marlene had become a mother again. It wasn't a miracle in the religious sense. It was science, persistence, and perhaps a final grasp at joy before the sun set on her storied career. And by her side, gently holding her hand, was Deshaun Carter, her 35-year-old husband, a man she had once arrested for petty theft 15 years ago, but who had, over time, transformed into a charismatic gym manager and loving partner, or so she thought. To outsiders, their relationship had always raised eyebrows. A highly respected cop marrying a man 25 years younger with a checkered past? It was tabloid gold. But Marlene didn't care. She believed in redemption. She had spent her entire career giving people second chances. Why not love? They met again in 2019 at a community outreach event on youth crime. He had just finished a reentry program and was speaking on stage about changing your story. Marlene was moved. He saw something in her that no one else did. Not the captain who overlooked her for promotion, not her ex-husband who left when she couldn't conceive, but this man saw her. Soon, lunches turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks. And within a year, Deshawn proposed. "You're my piece," he whispered. "Let me give you the family you always wanted." Marlene laughed at first. At her age? But after some long talks and some hard-earned savings, they flew to New York and found a clinic specializing in IVF for older women. The doctors warned her of the risks, but she was determined. They tried once, failed, tried again, and finally, on the third attempt, it worked. A twin pregnancy. At 59, the media caught on when Marlene, still patrolling the streets at 7 months pregnant, helped de-escalate a hostage situation at a gas station. Photos of her in uniform, belly round beneath her Kevlar vest, went viral. Some hailed her as a hero. Others mocked her as delusional. But Marlene didn't care. She had waited a lifetime for this. In the weeks leading up to the birth, her colleagues at the department pooled together vacation time to give her a few months of maternity leave. Her daughter from a previous relationship, Clarissa Bryant, now 35 and a successful attorney in D.C., reluctantly agreed to visit after years of estrangement. Clarissa had never trusted Deshawn. She saw through the charm, the gym selfies, the overly curated image. "He's not your future, Mom," she had warned. "He's your obituary waiting to be written." Marlene had waved her off. "You don't know him like I do." That was the last conversation they had before the birth. Back in room 212, the nurse entered again with 2 fresh bottles. Marlene handed over the twins gently and asked for a moment alone with Deshawn. "You nervous?" she asked softly, her voice hoarse. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I guess. 2 kids. At once. Feels surreal." Marlene squeezed his hand. "We did it. No matter what anyone says, no matter what tomorrow brings, we did it." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, we sure did." She reached for the drawer beside her bed and pulled out a folded note. "Just in case I don't make it back home. I wrote something for them." Deshawn looked confused. "You're not going anywhere. I'm 60D. This body's been through hell and back. Nothing's promised. I just want them to know how much I love them if I don't get to say it again." He stared at her, silent. The note trembled in her hands, then disappeared into the side pocket of the baby bag. Moments later, the nurse returned to take the twins for a routine checkup. Marlene smiled, kissed each forehead, and whispered, "Be strong, my loves." As the door clicked shut, it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of her life. After decades of loss, sacrifice, and the kind of loneliness that most wouldn't understand unless they'd worn a badge for 40 years, Lieutenant Marlene Bryant had finally been gifted something precious, a family. 2 beautiful newborns. A second chance. At 6:12 a.m., the hospital floor was bathed in the pale gold of early morning light. Nurses moved quietly through their routines. Room 212 had been marked as no visitors at Marlene's request. She wanted a few private hours with her husband, Deshawn Carter, before the whirlwind of press, colleagues, and extended family came calling. The twins, Justice and Mercy, had been wheeled to the nursery for routine exams, and Marlene sat back against the raised hospital bed, visibly exhausted. Her body trembled with post-labor fatigue, but she was glowing. A new mother, a warrior at rest. Deshawn stood by the window, staring at the skyline, hands in his pockets. He had been distant ever since the babies were born. Not cold, but unreadable. The smile forced, the gestures rehearsed. Marlene, keen as ever, picked up on it. "You've barely looked at them," she said quietly. He turned. "I'm just processing. It's a lot." She motioned for him to come closer. "Then say what you need to say." He hesitated, then took a step forward. "I thought I'd feel more ready," he admitted. "But this, all of this, twins, diapers, your daughter looking at me like I'm a scam artist, it's overwhelming." Marlene didn't flinch. "It's not about being ready. It's about showing up." A long silence. Then she added softly, If there's something I should know, now's the time, Deshawn. He looked down, paused, then reached into his hoodie pocket. At first, Marlene assumed he was grabbing his phone. But what he pulled out was cold. Black. Metal. A gun. Marlene's eyes went wide. "D, what the hell are you?" 3 shots. Muffled. Close range. Straight to the chest. She didn't scream. Didn't get the chance. Her body jerked violently, and the ECG monitor beside her flared red with warnings. Blood soaked through her hospital gown, a dark crimson blooming over the fresh stitches on her abdomen. Deshawn stood frozen for a split second, then rushed to the bed, but not to help. He grabbed the note she had written earlier, the one meant for the twins, and shoved it into his pocket. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry. You weren't supposed to see the messages." 6:19 a.m. A nurse, hearing the monitor alarm, rushed into room 212 and let out a scream. Marlene lay lifeless on the bed, her eyes wide open, mouth slightly parted, her hands still curled as if she were reaching for her babies. Deshawn was on the floor, pretending to sob. He pointed toward the window and cried out. Someone came in. He had a mask. He shot her and ran. Chaos erupted. The hospital was locked down within minutes. Code Blue echoed across the intercom. Nurses scrambled. Doctors ran. The twins were taken to the NICU for safety. Deshawn was detained by hospital security until detectives arrived. But something felt off. To everyone. 7:30 a.m. Crime scene begins. Detective Paula Jenkins, Marlene's best friend and former partner, was asleep when the call came. "She's been shot," the voice on the phone said. "Who?" Paula asked groggily. The answer made her sit up straight, cold dread sweeping over her. "Marlene? Shot? At the hospital?" By the time Paula arrived, room 212 had been sealed off. Blood stained the mattress. A bullet was found lodged in the window frame. Another in the headboard. The third passed clean through Marlene's torso and embedded into the four-pole. But here was the first red flag. No forced entry. No prints on the window. No footage of anyone entering or exiting the floor in the last hour, except Deshawn. Hospital cameras had been tampered with, but not professionally. Sloppy. The camera outside room 212 had its feed manually unplugged just before sunrise. Someone who knew where the cord was. Security footage before the unplug showed Deshawn pacing back and forth outside her door. Alone. At 5:58 a.m. 8:45 a.m. First interrogation. In the security holding room, Deshawn sat hunched over, crying. His hands trembled, his voice cracked. She was sleeping. I turned away for a minute, and I heard the shots. I tried to stop the guy, but he shoved me. Detective Paula didn't buy it. She stared down hard. "You turned away?" she asked. "With a woman who just gave birth less than an hour ago." He nodded, avoiding eye contact. She leaned in. "You're lying." Silence. He broke down. "She didn't trust me anymore. I knew she was going to change the will. Leave me with nothing." That's when Paula's eyes changed. From sadness to rage. "You killed her for money." He looked up. She was going to ruin everything. In the hours to come, a deeper investigation would uncover deleted texts, bank transfers, and a mistress 6 months pregnant with Deshawn's child. But for now, as the sun rose over Atlanta, the city mourned the death of a hero, and 2 newborns cried for a mother who would never hold them again. 3 months before the shooting, Lieutenant Marlene Bryant was already starting to feel something wasn't right. It was subtle at first. Deshawn began coming home later than usual. He claimed he was working extra shifts at the gym, trying to save up for the twins, but his stories didn't always match up. Sometimes, she'd call him, and the phone would ring twice before going to voicemail. Other times, she'd find his location turned off for hours at a time. Marlene wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. Her career had trained her to look for patterns, not panic. But deep down, a voice she'd long silenced began to whisper, "He's hiding something." Still, she wanted to believe him. After all, she had chosen this life. Chosen him. She remembered the backlash when she announced the engagement, how her colleagues had pulled her aside, asking if she was sure. Even her own daughter, Clarissa, had accused Deshawn of being a con artist. Marlene had fought for him, defended him, loved him against all odds. That kind of loyalty doesn't fade overnight. It erodes slowly, painfully, one crack at a time. The first major crack came in December. She received an email from her bank, alerting her to a large transfer, $10,000 wired to an unfamiliar account. When she confronted Deshawn, he told her it was for a surprise nursery renovation. But when she asked for the contractor's name, he stammered, said the guy was a friend and off the books. That same week, she found a receipt in his jacket for a $1,300 necklace from a boutique she'd never heard of. The name on the receipt wasn't hers. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. Instead, she started keeping notes. Quiet observations in a leather-bound journal she kept under her nightstand. Entry after entry filled with times, dates, suspicions, as if she were building a case against the suspect. It was how she coped, how she stayed grounded. Marlene wasn't just a wife. She was an investigator to the end. Then came a phone call. It was late January, just 2 weeks before her due date, when Tiffany Monroe left a voicemail on the landline. She sounded young, nervous. I don't know if this is the right number, but I think your husband might be seeing someone else. My name's Tiffany. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I think you deserve to know. Please call me back. Marlene never returned the call, but she saved the message. That night, she sat in the nursery alone. The walls were painted soft lavender, sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains. 2 cribs stood side by side, still wrapped in plastic. She stood there in silence for a long time, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding the photo of Deshawn that used to sit by her bed. She turned the frame face down. Clarissa visited the next morning. They hadn't spoken much in months, but the pregnancy had softened her anger. As they sipped tea on the porch, Marlene asked her daughter a simple question. Do you think I made a mistake? Clarissa hesitated, then replied, I think love makes us blind, and guilt keeps us quiet. Marlene nodded. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't let the tears fall. She had made her bed, but she hadn't expected to die in it. 2 days later, she visited a lawyer. She didn't change her will completely, but she added a clause. If anything were to happen to her under suspicious or violent circumstances, the primary custody of the twins and management of her assets would fall to Clarissa, not Deshawn. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She also drafted 2 letters, one addressed to Clarissa, the other to her unborn children. She placed them in a sealed envelope and gave it to her friend Paula Jenkins with a single instruction. If anything happens to me, anything, give these to my daughter. By the time February 8th arrived, Marlene was exhausted in every sense of the word. Her body was swollen. Her back ached. But more than that, her heart was tired. She smiled when the contractions began. Smiled when Deshawn helped her into the car. Smiled when she was wheeled into labor and delivery. Because despite everything, she still believed that maybe, just maybe, things could turn around. She didn't know that Deshawn had emptied out her emergency fund 2 days earlier. Didn't know he'd bought a burner phone and deleted his text history. Didn't know Tiffany had begged him to come clean, and he had laughed in her face. But she knew something wasn't right. And she knew that love, once broken, never quite fits back together the same. In her hospital bag, tucked between the baby blankets and an old photo of her late husband, was her badge. She had wanted to show it to the twins, the one thing she was always proud of. Lieutenant Marlene Bryant, Atlanta PD. She carried that title like armor. But in the end, it couldn't protect her from the person she loved the most. And as her journal entries stopped at February 7th, the final line read simply, "He's hiding something. I can feel in my bones." Tiffany Monroe wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. Quiet, sweet, the type who blended into the background. She worked the night shift at a physical therapy clinic on the west side of Atlanta, just trying to get by after a nasty breakup and a move from Alabama. She wasn't looking for love, but love, or at least what she thought was love, found her anyway. Deshawn Carter walked in one Thursday afternoon with a client from his gym. He was charming, well-dressed, all muscles and confidence. But it was his smile, that smooth, practiced grin, that made Tiffany lose her breath a little. It wasn't long before he asked for her number. A week later, they were having dinner. 2 weeks after that, They were sleeping together. What she didn't know then was that Deshawn was already married to Lieutenant Marlene Bryant, a 60-year-old police veteran and local legend. What he told Tiffany was a whole different story. He said he was trapped, claimed he was stuck in a loveless marriage to an older woman who controlled his money, his house, even his schedule. She got pregnant just to keep me, he told her. She wanted to tie me down before I could walk away. Tiffany, naive and 24, believed every word. She saw Deshawn as misunderstood, a man trying to escape a toxic situation, just needing someone to believe in him. And when she found out she was pregnant with his baby, she thought maybe this was the fresh start they both needed. But then came the news segment. Tiffany was brushing her teeth one morning when she saw it, a feel-good story on Channel 9 about a local cop making headlines. Meet Lieutenant Marlene Bryant, age 60, expecting twins with her younger husband, Jim, owner Deshawn Carter. Photos flashed across the screen. Marlene beaming, her belly round, and Deshawn by her side, smiling like the world was perfect. Tiffany dropped her toothbrush. Her stomach twisted. She played the clip 3 times before she even moved. The betrayal hit like a freight train. She wasn't just the side chick. She was the secret. And the more she dug, the worse it got. Marlene wasn't some bitter old woman Deshawn was trying to escape. She was a decorated officer, respected by the entire city, with decades of service and a spotless record. Tiffany called him that night, hysterical. At first, he didn't answer. Then he finally picked up, calm as ever. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said coldly. She demanded answers. He gave her something else. A plan? "Look, she's rewriting her will," he said. "If she signs it before the babies are born, I get nothing. But if something happens to her first, I get everything. The house, the money, the life insurance." At first, Tiffany thought he was joking. He wasn't. He walked her through the entire thing like it was a business deal. He knew the hospital's security schedule, knew what time the nurses changed shifts, knew which room Marlene would be in. He told her he'd already bought a gun, paid cash, untraceable, and he had a burner phone just in case. "She's going to be weak after the birth," he said. "I'll make it quick. It's better this way. Clean break. Then we can be a real family." Tiffany didn't respond. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing. She was carrying his child. How had she gotten here? That night, unable to sleep, she did the one smart thing that would eventually save her life. She hit record. On her phone, she captured everything. Deshawn explaining the murder plot in detail, bragging about how he'd get away with it, how no one would suspect him because everyone thinks I'm just her loyal little husband. He even laughed, that same smooth, disarming laugh he used when he first met her. That night, after pressing the record button and slipping her phone beneath a folded blanket on the couch, Tiffany couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, her hands resting on her stomach, feeling the faintest flutters of the life growing inside her. Every kick, every shift reminded her of the choices she had made, and the man she had trusted. How had she gotten here? Just 2 years ago, she was working double shifts at a Waffle House in Montgomery, trying to pay for night school. She had dreams to become a physical therapist to help people rebuild themselves. After a messy breakup with a boyfriend who left her for her best friend, she moved to Atlanta, promising herself she'd never fall for another smooth-talking liar. And then came Deshawn. He didn't come with red flags at first. He came with compliments, with flowers, with workouts designed just for her, and texts every morning that said, "Good luck today, beautiful." She didn't see the cracks until they were too wide to ignore. His answers became vaguer. His phone, more protected. He stopped sleeping over. And every time she asked about his situation with his wife, he said the same thing. "It's complicated, but I'm handling it." Tiffany wanted to believe him because the alternative was too humiliating. That she had fallen for a married man. That she was the other woman in a triangle she never agreed to join. But when the news clip aired, when she saw Marlene's face, glowing and proud, something inside her snapped. It wasn't just betrayal. It was shame. Shame for believing him. Shame for bringing a child into this. Shame for the way she let her heart override her common sense. She spent that entire night pacing her apartment. She played the recording back 3 times, each time hoping she had imagined it. that maybe she misunderstood. But no, his voice was calm, clear, certain. Murder. He was talking about murder like it was logistics. And then a new fear took hold. If he could do this to Marlene, a woman he lived with, shared a bed with, just had children with, what was stopping him from doing it again? From doing it to her? She thought about the night he brought her takeout and casually joked, "I know every inch of this place. You'd never be able to hide from me." She had laughed then. Now the memory made her cold. She sat in the bathtub, fully clothed that night, hugging her knees to her chest. At some point, she cried herself to sleep. And when she woke up the next morning, puffy-eyed, exhausted, and more afraid than she had ever been, she made a decision. Not just to save herself, but to save her child. This baby didn't ask to be part of some nightmare. And if she let Deshaun carry out his plan, if she stayed silent, she would be complicit in something irreversible. So she packed the phone, the napkin, the burner texts, and walked into the precinct with trembling hands and a backbone she didn't know she had. For the first time in her life, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. And maybe, just maybe, that was what real love looked like. Not for Deshaun, but for the innocent life inside her. The next morning, Tiffany tried to tell herself he wouldn't actually go through with it, that it was all talk, that maybe he was bluffing. Then came the news. Marlene Bryant, shot dead just hours after giving birth. 3 bullets to the chest. Hospital room. No witnesses. Tiffany vomited in her sink. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She knew it wasn't just talk. He had done it. She waited a day, then another, and then she realized something. She might be next. If he was willing to kill the mother of his children, what would stop him from silencing her too? So she walked into the police station. No lawyer. No hesitation. She handed over the recording. Gave him everything. The burner phone text, the photos of him with a gun, the notes he'd scribbled on a napkin in her apartment. She cried through most of it. But when they asked her why she was coming forward, she said only this: "Because I brought a life into this world, and I won't let his father take one away again." When detectives pressed play on the recording, what they heard was damning. There was no room for interpretation. It wasn't just a man talking about murder. It was a man comfortable with it. Calm, calculated, almost proud. And somewhere, miles away, his 2 newborn children slept in an incubator, unaware that the man who held them minutes after birth was already planning to walk away from all of it in blood. When the forensic team entered room 212 at St. Mercy Hospital, what they found didn't line up with Deshaun Carter's story. He claimed a masked intruder burst in, shot his wife, and fled through the hallway. Yet there were no signs of forced entry, no scuff marks, no fingerprints, and no one on camera entering or leaving that wing of the hospital. More importantly, the only visible set of fresh fingerprints on the door handle belonged to Deshaun. Detective Paula Jenkins, Marlene's longtime friend and now lead on the case, stood inside that room with clenched fists. It had only been 48 hours since her partner, her sister in blue, had bled out in a hospital bed just minutes after becoming a mother. Now Paula was staring at blood-stained sheets and empty lies. Deshaun's initial statement was shaky from start. He claimed he was by the window when the shots were fired and that the intruder must have slipped in when the nurse stepped out. But hospital logs showed the nurse had exited for less than 2 minutes, and no one else had access to that wing. Security footage outside room 212 had been mysteriously cut off at 5:59 a.m. The camera wire had been manually disconnected, not yanked, not shorted, but carefully unclipped. The IT team traced the system logs and discovered that someone had unplugged it just seconds before the shooting. The only person seen near that junction box? Deshaun Carter. Still, evidence in murder cases rarely works alone. It needs context, connection, motive. That's where the voice recording from Tiffany Monroe came in. It was the bombshell prosecutors prayed for. 14 minutes of Deshaun laying out his entire plan in his own voice. Every piece matched what the forensic team had found, from the direction of the bullets to the weapon's make and model. But they needed the murder weapon itself. So they went digging. Surveillance from a nearby alley, unrelated to the hospital, showed Deshaun exiting a side door around 6:25 a.m., holding what appeared to be a bundled cloth. 15 minutes later, a sanitation worker reported a strange black trash bag in a public dumpster 2 blocks from the hospital. Inside the bag, a blood-stained hoodie, latex gloves, and a Glock 43 handgun, serial number filed off. Ballistics confirmed the Glock was the exact weapon used to kill Marlene Bryant. The blood on the hoodie? Also Marlene's. And the gloves? Deshawn's fingerprints were inside. It was over. But even as the case seemed airtight, Deshawn refused to break. During formal interrogation, he maintained the same story. Someone came in. I didn't see their face. They were gone before I could do anything. Detective Jenkins leaned in across the table, slid a photo of the gun toward him, then hit play on the audio file from Tiffany. He didn't blink. She tried again. You planned this. You watched her give birth, held your babies, and then you shot her like she was nothing. Deshawn finally looked up. His face was blank. I did what I had to do. Those 7 words were all they needed. When the grand jury heard the recording and saw the evidence, the indictment came quickly. First-degree murder. Premeditated. Aggravated with special circumstances. Committed within hours of childbirth. At the arraignment, the judge denied bail. You are a danger to your own children, she stated flatly. And yet, even behind bars, Deshawn continued to lie. To his public defender, to the press, to anyone who'd listen. He claimed Tiffany set him up, that she manipulated the audio, that Marlene had enemies in the department. He even suggested her daughter Clarissa might have been involved. But those lies collapsed under the weight of the truth. A search warrant on Deshawn's home revealed more damning evidence. Browser history detailing how to disable hospital security cameras, a scribbled to-do list that included clean prints from gun, and, perhaps most disturbing, a printed life insurance policy with his name listed as sole beneficiary, signed by Marlene just 4 days before giving birth. Clarissa Bryant, Marlene's daughter, broke down in court when prosecutors showed that document. She didn't want to believe he was capable of this, she said through tears. She was scared, but she still hoped he'd come through. One more discovery sealed the emotional blow. A letter, found in the lining of Marlene's hospital bag, addressed to her twins. Handwritten, unmailed. If anything happens to me, know that I loved you before you took your first breath. You are not mistakes. You are miracles. I carried you with faith. Let my life remind you that sometimes the people who claim to love us are the ones who teach us how to survive. The courtroom was silent. No one, not even the defense, spoke after it was read aloud. The trial of Deshawn Carter began 6 months after the murder of Lieutenant Marlene Bryant, and by then, the story had become national news. Headlines dubbed it the Miracle Mother Murder, and court TV shows debated every angle. Was it greed, manipulation, or simply evil? Whatever it was, one thing was clear. Deshawn wasn't just on trial for murder. He was on trial for betraying the very soul of a woman who believed in him more than anyone else ever had. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Reporters lined the benches. Cameras weren't allowed, but sketches of Deshawn in his navy blue suit, expression flat, eyes cold, flooded the news. On the prosecution side sat Clarissa Bryant, her face hard, her hands clenched around a photograph of her mother. 2 seats over were Justice and Mercy's temporary guardians, a retired police couple who had stepped in until custody could be finalized. Deshawn pleaded not guilty. His defense? It was Tiffany. She manipulated the recording. She had a vendetta. She wanted Marlene out of the picture. It was a weak strategy, and the jury knew it. Prosecutor Michelle Langley opened strong. This man watched his wife, 60 years old, a police lieutenant, mother of his children, give birth to twins. Then he shot her, not in rage, not in a moment of panic, but by design, by plan, by choice. She laid out the evidence piece by piece. The security camera tampering, the dumpster gun, the text messages recovered from a burner phone, the voice recording played in full for the court. The recording hit like a sledgehammer. In it, Deshawn's voice is chillingly calm. If she dies before signing the new will, everything comes to me. I just need a clean window. Tiffany's voice, shaking. You're serious? He laughs. Do I sound like I'm joking? When the tape ended, no one in the room moved. One juror looked like she might vomit. Then came the witnesses. Tiffany Monroe took the stand with her hair pulled back, hands folded tightly in her lap. At 5 months postpartum, she looked pale, worn, and nothing like the girl who had once believed Deshawn's lies. She spoke through tears. "I thought he loved me," she said. "I thought we were building a life. But he was using me, just like he used Marlene." When asked why she recorded him, she replied simply, "Because I was scared. And somewhere deep down, I knew he was capable of exactly what he did." Next came Detective Paula Jenkins, Marlene's former partner. Her testimony was sharp, factual, but when she spoke about the moment she found her friend's body, her voice broke. "She was still warm," Paula whispered. She hadn't even had time to hold the twins again. She'd only just met them. Then it was Clarissa's turn. She stood tall in a dark blazer, her voice steady, but her pain was obvious. "My mother was the strongest woman I've ever known," she told the court. "She forgave people most wouldn't even speak to, and she believed in redemption, even when no one else did. That belief cost her everything." Deshawn never looked at her. His defense team tried to argue that he was overwhelmed, that fatherhood triggered unresolved trauma, that Tiffany had pressured him to get rid of Marlene. But the evidence was undeniable. Cold, clinical, 3 shots, close range, 1 execution style. The medical examiner testified that Marlene likely died within seconds, unable to cry out for help. Her wounds were consistent with someone lying down, shot from above. On the final day of testimony, the prosecution brought out Marlene's handwritten letter, the one addressed to her twins. They projected it on the courtroom screen. Her words filled the room. "I may not live to watch you grow, but I lived long enough to know you are worth everything I have. You were born from faith. Hold that close. And know that I did not die in fear. I died in love." A quiet sob escaped someone in the gallery. The jury deliberated just under 5 hours. When the verdict came, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty. First-degree murder. Aggravated murder of a spouse within 24 hours of childbirth. Tampering with evidence. Attempted insurance fraud. The judge's voice was like steel. "You are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Deshawn didn't flinch. He stared straight ahead, as if he was already gone. Outside the courthouse, Clarissa spoke briefly to the press. "This isn't justice," she said. "Justice would be my mother holding her babies. Justice would be her still being here. But today, at least, the truth got the final word." Inside the NICU, the twins were finally cleared to go home, into the arms of a family that would never let them forget where they came from or who their mother was. The courthouse emptied, but the story didn't end there. In the weeks after the trial, reporters moved on. The headlines faded. Convicted husband, murdered hero cop, twin tragedy. All replaced by the next scandal, the next outrage, the next death. But for those closest to Lieutenant Marlene Bryant, life didn't move on so easily. Clarissa Bryant, now the legal guardian of her half-siblings Justice and Mercy, found herself stepping into a role she never expected. Single mother at 35, to 2 infants who would never know their biological mother, and whose father would rot in a prison cell for the rest of his life. Clarissa had sat through the entire trial without missing a day. She dressed the same each morning, dark blazer, minimal makeup, hair pinned back, like armor. On the surface, she looked unshaken. But inside, every minute in that courtroom carved into her soul. There was a moment, on the 3rd day, when the prosecution introduced the murder weapon into evidence, the very gun Deshawn had used. Clarissa hadn't expected to feel anything. But when they held it up in a plastic evidence bag and said the words, "This is the Glock 43 used to kill Lieutenant Bryant," her body went cold. She couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened. It was no longer a courtroom. It was room 212. The beeping monitors. Her mother's lifeless hands. The silent scream behind Deshawn's crocodile tears. Clarissa had to bite the inside of her cheek so hard she drew blood just to stay grounded. On the day they played the recording, the one where Deshawn planned the murder like it was nothing more than a gym renovation, she gripped the armrest so tightly her fingers went numb. Every word was a nail. Every laugh from his voice was another betrayal. But it wasn't until they read her mother's handwritten letter aloud that she finally broke. The letter had been discovered in the lining of Marlene's hospital bag. She had written it days before the birth, a letter to the twins, just in case she didn't make it. Clarissa didn't even know it existed until that moment. As the courtroom fell silent and the DA began reading Marlene's words, Clarissa felt something crack open inside her. A grief so sharp it felt like heat. If anything happens to me, know that I loved you before you took your first breath. You are not mistakes. You're miracles. I carried you with faith. Let my life remind you that sometimes the people who claim to love us are the ones who teach us how to survive. Clarissa covered her mouth. She didn't sob. She heaved. It was raw, ugly, the kind of grief that makes people uncomfortable. But no one looked away. Not the jury. Not the court sketch artist. Not even Deshawn, though he kept his eyes down like a man staring at his own grave. After court adjourned that day, Clarissa stepped into the hallway and leaned against the marble wall. Her legs buckled. Detective Paula Jenkins caught her before she hit the ground. I keep thinking, Clarissa whispered through tears, that maybe if I tried harder, if I had pushed her more, she would have left him. Paula just held her. You tried. She made her choices, and he made his. Clarissa nodded, but the guilt didn't leave. She carried it in every diaper change, every midnight feeding, every first the twins would experience without their mother. She carried it in the silence that followed applause after her courtroom testimony, when all she really wanted was to scream. The verdict gave her no peace. The sentence didn't bring back the woman who used to hum when she cooked or leave notes on the fridge that said, "I'm proud of you even when I don't say it." But that letter, that final letter in her mother's handwriting, it gave her something else. Permission to stop asking why. Permission to live. Some days, she stared at them and saw her mother's eyes. Other days, she saw his. The babies were growing fast. Mercy, the girl, had her mother's steady stare. Justice, the boy, had already started to smile in his sleep. They had no idea they had been born into grief. No idea that the first breaths they took were followed minutes later by their mother's final ones. Clarissa kept them surrounded by love, friends, church members, former police officers who came by with casseroles and tears. But grief is quiet. It slips into the cracks of routine. And for Clarissa, it often arrived at night, in the stillness of 3 a.m. feedings, when the only sound was the bottle clicking against a tiny mouth, and the only light came from the soft blue glow of a baby monitor. She'd whisper, "She should be here. You should be with her." And sometimes she'd cry, but never in front of them. One afternoon, while organizing the nursery, Clarissa opened a locked chest Marlene had kept at the foot of her bed. Inside were photographs, medals from her years on the force, a worn Bible, and a bundle of letters wrapped in a ribbon. There were 7 letters, each addressed to someone different. One for Clarissa, one for each of the twins, one for Paula Jenkins, one for the twins' future first day of school, one for Marlene's ex-husband, the man who left her before IVF was ever a thought, and one with no name. Clarissa opened hers first. "I know you didn't trust him, and you were right, but I needed to believe in someone again, even if it was foolish. Thank you for always loving me, even when I couldn't accept it. You were the strongest thing I ever made, and now I'm asking you to raise the 2 most fragile." She read it twice, then folded it gently and pressed it to her lips. The twins' letters would wait until they were older. Clarissa placed them in a fireproof safe, along with their birth certificates, a copy of the police report, and a single photo. Marlene in her hospital bed, eyes shining, holding both babies before they were taken away for checkups. That photo was taken just 18 minutes before her death. It would be the last photo ever taken of her alive. The city of Atlanta didn't forget either. 2 months after the trial, the police department held a ceremony in Marlene's honor. A plaque was mounted at the precinct entrance, bearing her name and badge number. Above it read, "In service, in sacrifice, in love." Detective Paula Jenkins gave the final speech. She died doing what she always did, Paula said, believing in someone others gave up on. And she paid the price for that faith. But she also left something behind, 2 lives, and a legacy none of us will forget. As she stepped down from the podium, she placed her own badge, Marlene's former partner's badge, beneath the plaque. It would stay there for a week. Back at home, Clarissa started a nonprofit in her mother's name, the Bryant Foundation for Women in Uniform. Its mission: to support female first responders navigating motherhood, aging, infertility, and trauma, all the quiet burdens no one talks about. Within 6 months, it had raised over $200,000. Within a year, they'd open a hotline. And within 2 years, Justice and Mercy took their first steps, side by side, in a home filled with framed memories of a woman they'd never remember, but who had risked everything to bring them into the world. Sometimes, Clarissa would read her mother's letter again, not out of pain, but strength. And when the twins turned 4, she finally showed them the photo, the one in the hospital, where Marlene smiled like the world had just been saved. "She loved you before she even met you," she said softly. "And the reason you're here is because she believed love was still worth fighting for." Years passed, but the story of Lieutenant Marlene Bryant never truly faded. In police academies across Georgia, her name was spoken during ethics training, not because she broke the rules, but because she followed her heart, because she believed in people even when they didn't deserve it. Because sometimes strength doesn't come with a badge or a gun, but with compassion. In the quiet suburbs of Atlanta, her twins, Justice and Mercy, grew into kind, curious children. Clarissa raised them with love, not with vengeance, not with fear, but with a deep sense of honesty. By age 6, they knew their mother had been a hero. By age 8, they asked the hard questions. Why isn't she here? Who did it? What happened that day? By the time they turned 12, Justice had grown into a thoughtful, quiet boy with a love for books and documentaries. Mercy, on the other hand, was fire and light, bold, curious, the kind of girl who raised her hand first in every class. Despite their differences, the two were inseparable. They shared everything: snacks, secrets, even dreams. And the one thing they never stopped asking about was her, their mother, the woman they never met, yet somehow felt connected to through every photo, every story, every whispered bedtime prayer. On the day of their 13th birthday, Clarissa handed them each a sealed envelope. "These are from your mom," she said softly. "She wrote them before you were born. I've waited until now because I wanted you to understand not just what she said, but who she was." Justice opened his first. It was handwritten, careful, full of hope. "To my son, Justice, I gave you that name because I believe in it. Even when the world doesn't play fair, even when people fail us, even when I'm not there, I want you to live with purpose. Speak for those who can't. Protect those who won't be protected." Mercy's letter was similar, but warmer. "To my daughter, Mercy, I chose your name because we all need it, especially the strong ones. The world will tell you to toughen up, but I want you to stay soft. Be brave, yes, but also be kind. That's the kind of strength that saves lives." They didn't cry right away. They just sat there, reading and rereading. Quiet. Changed. That summer, Justice entered an essay contest titled "The Person Who Inspires Me Most." He wrote about a woman who never got to see her children grow up, but made sure they grow up safe. His essay won first place statewide. The judges cried. Mercy, meanwhile, took up public speaking. At a memorial for fallen officers, she stood before a crowd of hundreds, her voice steady, her spine straight. "My mother was a badge," she said. "But more than that, she was a heart. She believed in second chances. She believed in people. And even though she never got to raise me, she raised the bar for what love really means." After the ceremony, an older officer approached Clarissa and said, "They're hers. You can see it." Clarissa nodded. "She's in every breath they take." That night, as the twins blew out the candles on their birthday cake, Clarissa watched them with a lump in her throat. She had raised them through nightmares, courtrooms, colic, and confusion. But now, as teenagers, they were becoming something more than survivors. They were becoming whole. And though the ache of what was lost would never fully fade, Clarissa knew one thing for sure. Their mother hadn't just given them life. She had given them direction. Clarissa never lied. She told them their father made a choice, a terrible one, and that he would spend the rest of his life facing the consequences. But she also told them something more powerful. Your mom gave you life, knowing she might not live to see it. That's not just love, that's courage. The nonprofit foundation in Marlene's name flourished. Each year, a scholarship was awarded to a female police officer pursuing motherhood, whether through IVF, adoption, or fostering. Each recipient received a letter handwritten by Clarissa that began with the same words. This began with a woman who believed love was stronger than fear. In prison, Deshaun Carter became a ghost. He refused media interviews. He declined visitors. Even when Tiffany gave birth to their child, a son named Cameron, he didn't reach out. Tiffany had cut all ties, moved to Florida, and raised her boy alone. She never changed her last name, but she never spoke as either. Occasionally, Clarissa would wonder if he ever thought about the twins. If in the dark of a prison cell, he imagined what they looked like. If guilt ever touched him. If regret ever whispered through the silence. But she never reached out. She never needed to. Some doors stay closed for a reason. On the 10th anniversary of Marlene's death, the city unveiled a bronze statue outside the downtown precinct. It showed her in uniform, holding the hands of two small children, one boy, one girl, their backs turned, walking forward. The plaque read, "She didn't live to raise them, but she gave them the world anyway." At the dedication ceremony, Justice and Mercy stood in front of the statue, now 13 years old, their eyes locked on the figure they knew only through stories, photos, and the way their aunt said her name, with both pride and pain. Mercy leaned into her brother and whispered, "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" Justice nodded. She already was. Before we were even born. Clarissa, standing behind them, said nothing. She just smiled through tears. Later that night, in a box under her bed, she placed 2 new letters, one for each child. Letters she hoped they'd never have to read. But just in case. Because that's what her mother taught her. Prepare for the worst, but love like it'll never come. As the years moved forward, the world didn't get easier. But the Bryant family stood firm. Love, as it turned out, could survive anything, even betrayal, even bullets, even silence. It survived in lullabies sung to infants in the middle of the night, in photo albums marked with fingerprints and crayon scribbles, in the small victories of ordinary days, a soccer goal, a math quiz, a hug too long after school. It survived in 2 children who would grow up not with bitterness, but with strength, because their mother died in the worst way imaginable, but lived, always, in the best way possible.